some point, for some reason. It might be legitimate, might not be. Someone's going to test you. Even if you lose, you're going to have to stand up for yourself.
This is not a fucking game. Peace mode. Give me those beats, I eat those. Peace mode.
The guy comes over and it's your day to get your package, and he tries to take your package from you that your people sent you. If you let him do it, there's going to be 10 other dudes. Oh, yeah, you let that guy take his package? I'm going to go get his TV. Right down the line until somebody's after your ass. And that's not good. But if you stand up that first time and they see you'll stand up for yourself, even if you lose, people will respect that. I don't mess with him. There's easier prey. Yeah, but I can get him. Doesn't matter. Don't mess with him. Why do you have to go and get that guy and get a couple lumps for it when you can go get that guy's stuff over there? It don't cost you nothing. It usually only has to happen once or twice, but just as importantly, that you didn't go to the man for help, you're going to be all right.
Now, if you're suddenly thinking, this isn't so bad, a black eye, a few scratches, and you're in the clear, think again.
The American public in general has been so profoundly brainwashed into thinking that what we're doing with our prison system is somehow normal or rational or just. I find that overwhelming and exhausting. Because the more you spend time inside and the more contact you have with people who've been directly affected, the more depraved the system appears.
Over 20%, 1 out of every 5 inmates are physically attacked every 6 months.
I wasn't in San Quentin a week, and I watched a man die right next to me. I watched 2 guys just walk up and just stab him to death. A part of me wanted to scream in fear, but I had a bigger fear of, man, what would these guys think about me? So I pretended like, man, this ain't nothing. I wanted these people's acceptance. They tell me, you know how to make a knife? Stab that guy there. Okay, and I did.
So instead of getting a traditional education or job training, prison's a great place to learn how to make a knife by dropping a razor blade onto the melted end of a toothbrush.
What happens when you have vast numbers of people in a system like that or in a location like that who have medical needs, mental health needs, educational needs, substance abuse, all of these things, and there's nobody who really knows how to handle that? So violence itself is often a failure of communication or alternatives for coping. There are all sorts of complex social pressures on people to be violent in prison. So a lot of the violence you see in prison is not an expression of the character of the people in prison. It's people reacting to the situation. And this is something so few people understand. If you took 1,000 people off the street and put them at Corcoran or Pelican Bay or Soledad, some huge number of them would end up committing violence because of the situation that they've been placed in.
5 years into his sentence, an older inmate, whose nickname was the Devil, wanted Reggie to take the blame for a knife that guards had found in the yard, but Reggie refused. The Devil attacked Reggie with a knife, slashing his neck. Reggie later would say he knew then either the Devil was going to kill him or he had to kill the Devil. About 15 minutes after Reggie was attacked, he jumped over a correctional officer and stabbed the Devil with a prison shank.
I sit back every day and I second guess myself. Could I have went about this situation any other way? And no matter how many times I tell myself this was the only thing that could have happened, it don't sit right with me in my cell because I should have never been there in the first place. I'm innocent, man. And you turned me into what y'all say I was. Y'all been lying on me this whole time and you turned me into a murderer because I had to.
After that, they put Reggie in solitary confinement, and he went from a life sentence without possibility of parole to facing the death penalty.
So he gets put on trial in the death penalty case, and his lawyer starts looking into his original case and gives me a call and says, I think this guy's innocent of what he went to prison for the first place. And the second reason Reggie got out, besides the prison stabbing, was this miracle of there happened to be a book that had been put out about the LA Homicide Division.
The author of the book had documented a ride-along with the LAPD detective.
This homicide investigator's first night that she was on the job.
The very night she investigated the murder she would ultimately arrest Reggie for.
And we're flipping through the book and reading it, and there's all this stuff in it that was never disclosed to the defense. That's all documented. That all indicates pretty clearly that Reggie's innocent.
But it would still take the Innocence Project 10 years to get Reggie out of prison.
A grandmother doing life for murder was released from prison yesterday after 17 years when a judge said she did not do it.
Susan Mellon recently filed a lawsuit against the detective who arrested her for hiding evidence. That detective is the same one who arrested Reggie Cole.
We as a society, we see the bad guy and the good guy. Well, that's cops and robbers. But when the cop becomes the robber, the game is over. The game is over. That's corruption.
It was a horrific twist of fate that led to Reggie's release. Bruce was more fortunate. His father's death led to an unexpected turn.
Providence was his big thing, and he had, great life insurance. It was $184,000 that my dad left me, and I was able to parlay that up to about $236 in the stock market. And then it was just 100% of my time dedicated to my case.
And that enabled Bruce to hire a private investigator.
We had essentially a growing war chest of evidence that I hadn't committed the crime, or at least that all the evidence that was presented was false evidence.
I had received a complaint from Bruce Lisker. I flew up to the state prison where Bruce Lisker was. I spoke to him. When somebody is accused of murder or you're arrested for murder, it's tape recorded. Everything is tape recorded. I couldn't find his tape. It had been taken out of evidence by Detective Monsu, and it was never put back into evidence.
Detective Monsu had said the footprints outside the house matched the footprints on the inside. Lieutenant Gavin found the footprints weren't actually looked at by a scientist or any qualified expert, so he took matters into his own hands.
So I contacted our people, Scientific Investigative Division. So he takes out this big magnifying glass, looks at it, looks at the other one, and he goes, these two don't match. See, this is a great embarrassment for any large organization that you've convicted somebody for murder, and then 5, 10, 20 years later, it turns out that the person's actually innocent. And this is what my lieutenant said. That motherfucker is not getting out of prison. Do you understand me, Sergeant Gavin? They will do everything they can to stop you, prevent you from coming forward with the information you have.
Upon reviewing the comprehensive work of the private investigator, the LAPD Internal Affairs Department claimed Bruce's complaints were unfounded and that no misconduct had occurred.
You can't have an internal investigation where we all investigate ourselves. That's like a joke. I'm not against the authorities or anything like that. I'm just against the system that has no checks and balances. Who the fuck is checking y'all?
I believe that internal affairs should be separate from the police department. There is no way that a police department can investigate themselves.
Currently, there are no independent organizations whose job it is to investigate police misconduct. And there's no oversight of prosecutors either.
Prosecutorial misconduct is a major factor of wrongful convictions. It's a single thread that runs through almost all of the wrongful conviction cases.
Jeff Deskovic has a master's in criminal justice, specializing in wrongful convictions. He's also a survivor of prosecutorial misconduct.
I spent 16 years in prison. I was wrongfully convicted at 17. I emerged at 32.
Jeff eventually won a lawsuit against Putnam County, New York for his conviction, which enabled him to start his own foundation.
And I'm the founder and executive director of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice.
There's no deterrence, there's no oversight, there's no punishment for prosecutors, so they can break the law. They don't face criminal penalties, even when they engage in withholding evidence of innocence, threatening witnesses, coercing witnesses, no matter how serious the misconduct is. If the prosecutor commits that after an arrest has been made, they have what's called prosecutorial immunity. They're above the law.
We need prosecutors to really uphold what's become just words, which is, they're there to do justice. They're there to do the right thing. It becomes more like we're there to win, especially when prosecutors' offices actually keep statistics on conviction rates. Well, You should be credited that you looked at a case where the police thought they had a good case, but a good prosecutor looked at it and said, you know what, there's some mistakes made here. We should drop the charges in this case. We should incentivize that. But instead, we actually incentivize the opposite of getting convictions and getting conviction rates. All of a sudden, justice gets lost in that process. And whether this guy committed the crime or not gets lost in that process, because it's all about winning my case.
Immunity, that's bullshit. I mean, in the real world, you know, you're supposed to be held accountable for your wrongdoings. So therefore, if you're a person of authority, then you have to be held at a higher standard than just a layman.
I think we actually need to step back and kind of rethink the whole system in the way we're approaching it, because it's become this game and people's lives are lost as a result of it.
If you ever do find yourself wrongfully convicted, odds are you're never getting out. The first thing you need to do is send preservation letters to the police department labs and the courts, requesting that you want all your evidence saved. Otherwise, they may destroy it within 30 days. Try to find an innocence project that'll take your case. Prepare for this process to take years, then pray for a miracle.
The Innocence Project estimates conservatively there could easily be 40,000 to over 100,000 Americans currently wrongfully convicted, the majority of which are people of color.
It's kind of hard for me to relate to my family because they don't see me as the same. It's like Adam and Eve when he told them don't go and don't eat this fruit, and they ate it and they were enlightened. I'm enlightened. I'm on the other side now. You know what I mean? I'm not the same as y'all no more. You know, I can't speak in a boisterous tone because everyone gets scared. But I'm not that dude. I'm not him. I'm innocent, man. I'm innocent. You know, I gotta fight my demons. I gotta do what I gotta do for me. You know, I got a child, you know, and I'm trying to get myself right so I can, you know, teach her right. But I mean, there's no accountability. These people that did this to me, these people that took everything, man, you know, they took everything.
Bruce's private investigator never gave up on his case.
He had a very vigorous private investigator who made a complaint to the LAPD, and it landed on the desk of an internal affairs investigator who looked at Bruce's claims in a very serious-minded fashion.
It's the people like Detective Monsu and the others out there that have made our job very difficult to do day after day, because we lose the confidence of the public and we lose the confidence of the courts. We have to have police chiefs, directors of public service that are willing to do the right thing and terminate employees who are doing the wrong thing. If you want to say you're the good guy, but you're ostracized by everybody that you believed in, it's a very difficult situation. Because I have to continue to work for the same department that did this to Bruce Lisker. I don't look at myself as a hero. I look at myself as a survivor, because the system attacked me, system went after me, and the system did everything they could to keep Bruce Lisker in jail and everything to keep me quiet. It's been a lot of therapy. My wife and I met in third grade. We were elementary, junior high, high school sweethearts. We lived on the same street, and it's been a very difficult road. She is third generation LAPD, and the survival is day by day, and always looking over your shoulder, whether you're doing the right thing or not. You're constantly looking over your shoulder, and every time I get called into the captain's office, I wonder, what did I do now? And I've never had that feeling before. I just kept on telling myself, they are not going to defeat me. They're not going to defeat me. It's just when you come across something like this, what are you going to do? And that's the difficult thing. If I had not given up the information that I did to the LA Times, Bruce Lisker would still be in prison.
A bloody footprint that was attributed to Bruce at his trial had recently been reanalyzed and shown to have not been made from Bruce's shoe. So that got us interested in the case, and we started talking to his private investigator and began the 7-month investigation.
And at the conclusion of that, they filed an article called A Case of Doubt that eventually won them an award, won the Times an award. I wound up sitting between 2005, when the first article came out, and 2009 in prison, 4 solid years. A widely recognized innocent man.
We knew back in 2003, 2004, that we had probably a person that was in prison for a crime he did not commit. And it took 5 years for the courts to work through the entire system. There were a lot of delays because of the conduct of my own police department and the conduct of the California Attorney General.
Reggie Cole spent 16 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. 10 of those years were spent in solitary confinement, and he had to kill another man to get a trial.
The whole way I've been telling them I'm innocent. Every article I'm in, everybody I'm talking to, I'm telling them I'm innocent, man. I didn't do anything to anyone. Don't care. Don't care. It's not that they didn't know, they didn't care.
It's a miracle Reggie got out at all. Tim's is a miracle story as well. In late 2012, after 26 years, he made parole.
I signed some papers for the parole officer. He said, okay, see you later. Didn't ask me how I was getting home. Didn't ask me if I had a home. When I realized these people honestly don't give a fuck.
To survive getting out is a lot harder than it sounds. You may have developed post-traumatic stress disorder, agoraphobia, paranoia, and require immediate treatment. You're going to need food, new clothes. You're going to need money for transportation to and from your parole officer meeting. If you miss a meeting, you could find yourself back in jail. You're going to need a job, but there's a lot of discrimination out there for employment and housing. Speaking of which, you're going to need a home.
I wouldn't have a home if it wasn't for the Rescue a Life Foundation to set up a house, transitional housing. God and that foundation is what's got me by. It's the reason I'm sitting here and not back inside.
The Rescue a Life Foundation was founded by Dwayne McAlway, who knows how challenging it can be to re-enter society. Dwayne did 25 years himself for murder.
After school, we would have to go down to my mother's dress shop and hang out all day and work around the business. At that time, we had several organizations that would just patrol that area, so it was pretty safe. We had the Black Panthers, Ron Karinga's organization, the United Slaves. We had the Nation of Islam. It was pretty cool. You know, you didn't have to worry about people coming in, holding you up and everything. You didn't have to worry about that type of stuff. But it was after the COINTELPRO, when they got pushed underground, that everything just seemed like, you know, went crazy. All the thugs came out, and then, you know, you were fair game then, the store operators. That's when we started having a lot of robberies, a lot of burglaries. My mother, she's just a little bitty 5'4" lady. She was beat up and robbed one day while I was there. And he grabbed her, threw her to the ground, and kicked her and beat her. After he got the money, then he figured it wasn't enough money. You know, and I was a little kid. I was probably about 11 years old at the time. You know, and he had this gun on her, and she was hollering at me not to move, and just, you know, and this dude was kicking her and demanding more money. And he had got all the money we had, you know.
Dwayne's mother wasn't robbed once. She was robbed over and over again.
I had a good friend, he would always comment about me being so uptight. And he smoked weed. He said, man, just take this. You need to, like medication. And led to other things, you know, that led to cocaine, that led to PCP, which ended up leading to my crime that happened that sent me to prison. You know, I went to prison for a second-degree murder. Some dudes robbed me. They were supposed to have been the middleman going to get the drugs, and then they ended up robbing me. Because it had happened to us in our business, the family business, so much. This guy, he wasn't just someone that was robbing me all the time. He was the image of somebody that had been victimized in my family. And all these other times you had got away, but this time you weren't going to get away. So it was kind of like a revenge thing, a retaliation thing for you and your kind. You're going to pay for that. And so what I found is that what you can't forgive, you end up becoming. What you can't forgive, you end up becoming. So I had to learn how to forgive and let that go. And I had to learn how to forgive him and let that go. Because he was also, after I got to see his record, and this guy had a rap sheet, you know, from one side of the room to the other, you know, and I could see that, you know, he needed the same help that I need.
We are generally taught to imagine that there is such thing as, for example, a murderer. Right? So in other words, a murderer in the public imagination and in most of our minds, whether we've thought about it or not initially, is someone who likes to murder and who would murder given the opportunity, right? Like that's what, it's like a vocation, right? That's what murderers do. They go around murdering, right? And that's why you don't let them out of prison, because you let them out of prison, they're going to murder again. The reality is that like murder is almost always a context. It's a situation. It is, statistically speaking, very rarely driven by a compulsion or a desire to do harm, right? It's a reaction to some set of circumstances, to a real or perceived threat, to some extreme emotional state. It's not a propensity. Basically, we're confusing the profile of a psychopath, the psychopath we've read about, you know, the serial killer, with prisoners in general, right? If we as a society stop and imagine that the people in prison are fully human, incredibly diverse, have often been through some of the most extreme and difficult situations and conditions, some of which many of us couldn't even really begin to imagine, then suddenly all that judgment and all that hostility and all that vindictiveness doesn't have such a natural place anymore. Many of our students have committed murder and felt horrible about their crime as soon as it happened. It's not like they needed to sit in prison for 15 or 20 years to realize they'd done a bad thing or to never want to do it again.
There is no human element to the criminal justice system. There is no human element. They're not there to help you. They're not there to help society. They can say that's what it's set up for all they want. That's not what it's there for. Not in California and not in a lot of places. It's a system set up to punish people, and they take a bad situation and they usually make it much worse.
You know what the official success rate of state prison is? Nearly 80% of all inmates go back within 5 years.
That's a success rate of 20%. Imagine if we had those requirements of airplanes. Wow, 8 out of 10 airplanes falling out of the sky. It's a little bit crazy making. And that is Department of Justice data. That's federal government research.
Dr. Michael Coyle attended Harvard University, has a PhD in justice studies, and is a professor of criminal justice at California State University. Dr. Coyle says that prison not only increases criminal behavior, but has a deleterious effect on society as a whole.
What happens to a family when the wage earner is removed from society and thrown into prison for 10 years? What happens to those children? How are they impacted? What are their chances of success in life? Start to go down. How does that impact the community? Loss of resources in that community. More demands in the community now to help this family. Maybe the other parent, maybe the children.
It's just so clearly a failure by every measure that you look at it, that I think we just need to rethink the whole thing and not just keep trying to put lipstick on this pig, because that's what we're doing.
But I think it is difficult for people to imagine a world without prisons now. We've become so accustomed to the idea of prisons that it's hard for people to imagine, well, what do you do with people if you don't put them in prison when they've done wrong? There are other alternatives.
Dostoevsky said the degree of civilization in a society could be judged by entering its prisons.
Hebrews 13:3. Remember those who are in chains, as if you were in chains with them.
If we don't, we put everybody at risk.
My husband, Dan, was a police officer, and he was killed in the line of duty. My goal at the trial was to get the man who killed my husband convicted of first-degree murder and be given the death penalty. And that's what I got. That's what happened. I thought, okay, here it is. I got justice I'm going to be free from this. And it didn't happen. It was just a lie. It didn't change anything.
Akilah Sherrills is famous for brokering the truce between the Crips and the Bloods in 1992. Then in 2004, he experienced an unimaginable tragedy.
My oldest son was murdered home from winter break, college. And was shot to death at a party. So my daughter called me and was like, hey, Dad, they're getting together over on Sesame Street in the projects and stuff, and they talking about going on a mission for Terrell. So I jumped in my car and I drove over there to the projects, and I jumped out the car and I said, hey, man, we've played this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth game long enough. I'm like, it's left us all blind and toothless. And I'm like, without anybody here to provide direction and guidance for the kids and the young folks and the parents and the loved ones that are left behind, I'm like, let's do something different.
I've met people who've had absolutely devastating things happen to them, and they're just angry and bitter. And I didn't want that to be me. I'd done that long enough, and it wasn't working. And I needed something different.
Dion and Akilah did something incredible. They rose to a consciousness most of us cannot imagine. They didn't condone what happened, but they forgave it.
I believe in the F word, forgiveness, because forgiveness is not, something that you do for the perpetrator. It's something that you do for yourself.
There is no cure to violence in violence. Violence can never be a cure for violence. It's been said for thousands of years, you can't fight darkness with darkness. You can only bring in the light.
If we're really trying to deliver public safety, then we need to start asking questions. We need to say why.
What happened in the personal life of this young man to cause him to have this callous heart, this fear that he would take another human being's life?
Why is this person cycling in and out of jail or prison?
For Dion, she decided she wanted the death of her husband, Dan, to lead to something transformative, something good. And the same for Akilah and his son, Tyrell.
We're going to harness the essence of Terrell, and we're going to do something much more profound with this.
The point is to understand what's happened. How can we repair the harm that's been done? How can we make sure that it doesn't happen again? And how can we, with that individual, but also with other individuals coming after them?
When we get the answer to that question, we need to actually do something about it.
Real investment in institutions that help people to heal from trauma. There was an interesting article in the New York Times a few years ago. It was called $1 Million Blocks, where if you calculated how many of the residents of that particular block were actually incarcerated, and you added up how much it cost the state to keep those people incarcerated, you would actually come up with more than $1 million per block. What I would say is take those $1 million that you're spending to put all those people in prison and invest them in the kinds of things that we know very well will actually transform those communities.
My passion is Shakespeare because it's about words. And the only way that you can heal trauma is to find language for it.
I met my father when I was like 15.
Never met him before?
No.
Never saw him?
Something strange here. It's some of my kind of background here a little bit.
What they're trying to do is simply inhabit that character as truthfully as they can. And in analyzing and digging down deep into the truth of that character, what happens is they begin to dig into their own lives.
When I was a young man and I came to prison, the older convicts taught me how to hustle at every opportunity to make money, how to get over on the police. And I looked up to them. They were my mentors. Through Shakespeare Behind Bars, I have learned that mentoring is very important, but it's also important to mentor them in the right direction.
So our recidivism rate in Kentucky for this program, 22 years old, is 5.1%. Guys that are out on the street, why didn't they go back? People ask all the time. Why? I say, don't ask me, ask them. What do they tell you? Here's what I hear them say. I take responsibility for the crime that brought me here. I now understand where that behavior came from because I've gone back in my life and I've looked at all of that, but I am not that human being anymore. That's what arts programming many times gives prisoners hope, because arts deal with the internal essence of what it means to be a human being.
Vipassana is an intense program, a meditative technique. The inmate has to go through it 24 hours a day for a 10-day period of time.
I spent 8.5 years on death row, and this was harder. All the stuff that's buried down deep, they come up gradually. They want you there long enough that you actually deal with your stuff.
She says, Nicholas has been shot. What do I do now? This is my baby. This is
a restorative justice workshop. They're very rare, and they're much harder on perpetrators of crimes than sitting in a prison cell. It puts these guys face to face with the human consequences of their actions. This is Rosa. Her son was killed in a drive-by shooting. And now she devotes her life to telling inmates serving time for murder what the effect was of their crime, not just for the deceased, but on everyone.
Why do I do this? It's my healing. And it shows you what a victim goes through.
And I thank you for coming here, taking the time to share your hurt and your pain with us. But it does help us become better people. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would give anything so that you and the rest of our victims' family wouldn't feel what you feel.
To you, I can see my victim's mother, how much they have to go through.
You know what? He didn't die in vain. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. He's helping you guys.
Restorative justice programs and victim offender reconciliations can take years. They require staff and resources, and they're incredibly successful. Those who go through these programs have as low as 10% rates of reoffending, as opposed to the 80% failure rates prisons shamefully have.
We sit there perplexed, like, wow, what are we going to do about this criminal justice system? It's such a mess. Maybe if we just stop doing these things that we're doing and we try on a whole new set of other things, it might turn out to be a little bit simpler than we thought.
The biggest prison we have is an invisible prison. It's the conditioned mind. And you don't know you're in the prison because you can't see bars, you can't see walls. And the conditioned mind is the separate mind. It doesn't exist. We are part of a collective mind. And if the collective mind is violent, then we are violent. And you can change that.
There's an opportunity here for us to take the wisdom that we know works, what we would do for our own kids, if our own kids were in trouble, and do it for everybody's kids. We need to end the war on drugs.
We have to demand once and for all an end to policing and prisons for profit.
At least half of the people in there are in there for crimes of addiction or economic desperation or mental health.
Instead of just throwing everybody that we've decided we can't help into prison.
Use the money for restorative justice programs, rehabs, and social services.
There has to be citizen oversight and accountability for all our public servants.
Luckily for us, we have access to all of the data. If you have any interest in justice or equal access to opportunity in this country, all the data luckily is out there. It's just a matter of whether you give a shit.
Our survival depends on being logical. Our survival depends on being smart. And our survival depends on love for each other. And love for yourself.
And a good Monday morning to you. California man finally free after serving 16 years for a crime he didn't commit.
I didn't think it was real until I saw my attorneys in visiting. And I'm trying to describe the feeling.
It was an unbelievable feeling. It was just an emotional roller coaster that, I cried walking out. It was just the magnitude of all these years. And now here it is. And then a moment later, I would be too bewildered to cry. And I would just be...
That whole day was really scary for me. A lot of people think that it would be yay. But I was terrified.
There were well-wishers there of officers that knew I think they knew the truth and certainly knew the character, my character. And then I was in the parking lot. The air smelled different. I wish my mom could have been there. I wish my dad could have been there. I wish my stepmom could have been there. But I think in a way they were. And it was good. It was good.
Like, once I got on the other side with my attorneys, I just felt like running, like just getting as far away from that place as I possibly could. That's probably not the answer that everybody would think that I would have, but it wasn't a joyous time for me. I mean, like, I literally was scared to death.
My cousin was waiting for me. My private investigator was waiting for me. And I said, you want to hear what I actually said? And I looked at Paul and I said, let's get this stuff in the truck and get the fuck out of here. And we couldn't leave fast enough.
First place we stopped at was IHOP for some breakfast. And I was like amazed at just the syrup menu. It just was overwhelming. Like, it was completely overwhelming.
I haven't been in a vehicle without being chained at my feet and with a waist chain and then handcuffs hooked to the waist chain and in a paper jumpsuit for 26 years.
The word adjustment, I mean, I try to figure that word out. Do I have to? I'm still trying to figure that word out. Like, how do you adjust coming from the planet Mars to Earth? I don't even think the oxygen is the same up there. I don't think I'm adjusted at all.
But maybe it's possible, still possible.